Hey everybody, time for the Surf and Turf Show. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Surf and Turf Show After Dark. Adam, how are you doing this fine evening?
Daniel-san, I'm doing wonderful. How are you?
I'm good. Although I can never hear Daniel-san again without thinking about the video you showed me that says
The
Daniel's the bad guy. Daniel's the
well,
bad guy.
Daniel's the real bully. Yes,
I just
but
can't. I can't unsee that. Like you've ruined
we could,
a childhood favorite.
we could talk Cobra Kai. Yeah, we could definitely Karate Kid, Cobra Kai. That could be like a later episode.
We'll have to do that. We'll have to get to it. But for now, when you say Daniel-san, which I probably heard 700 million times in my life, as is everybody else named Daniel that grew up in the 80s, I just can't unsee it.
What about Danny Boy?
So I never really got that, like an Irish singer
Never.
thing. Like I don't know. Maybe you
Never
grew up
got
in the
that.
Northeast. Maybe it's different.
Yeah,
Irish
that's
singing
why
wasn't big in the South.
It's the proximity to Boston. Yeah,
it must be it. Like some kind of blast radius thing. No, it just wasn't big. There was not a lot of Irish singing. Like, I didn't hear the pipes and all this until, well into adulthood. It's kind of like chicken wings. It's another thing that just didn't exist in the South when I grew up, or at least in Texas. I shouldn't speak for all Southerners. Never had chicken wings, and then all of a sudden, the chicken wings are everywhere. Just weird. I know one of those weird like regional things. You know what? It's funny because this discussion plays exactly into what I was already thinking about to kind of start the show with. So my wife's out of town. She's doing this pilgrimage thing. They're going to see Pope Leo, the American Pope. Thousand of great memes about that right now. Seems like a great guy, although in my opinion means very little to the Pope, I'm sure. But so anyway, when she's gone,
you're a member of the flock.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, let's not pretend that hey, he's a great guy that carries any weight at all. But yes, he's the Pope. He's like the center of morality for one of the world's major religions. Anyway, so we watch bad movies and nothing to do with Pope. We watch bad movies when my wife is gone, and not like immoral movies, but more like cheesy movies or movies that my wife does not care for. So basically, it means anything with like kind of space and sci-fi or pirates. And so we've gone through the Pirates of the Caribbean the last couple of days. Caribbean, I guess, take your pick. And I am just marveling, and this has to do with what you're just talking about, right? This idea of kind of, or what we were just talking about with kind of the regionalization of the world, how there was more regionalization when we were kids, and it feels like it's all kind of blended more together. But that's one of the huge themes of the movies that I love about it, right? So it's a good movie in its own right. I mean, Johnny Depp, awesome pirate, just lots of great piratey goodness. But I love this repeated theme of like the pirates are sort of the protagonists more as you get later because they represent kind of the forces of freedom, and they're really pushing back against this idea that the world is kind of a contained, known thing. And then you have kind of the other side, which is, I guess, arguably the good guys or the bad guys. I'm not really sure. It's a little nebulous. They were really trying to say, no, the world is getting smaller. We're going to control things. We're going to kind of stitch it together and bring order to it. And I think, in spite of the fact that they kind of glamorize the pirates a little, they do an okay job of kind of pitching both sides of that. Like, you probably don't totally want to live on Tortuga, but maybe you're a little like, well, the East India Company's kind of jerky and controlling. And I like the that they kind of play that tension out. And I don't know about you, but I feel that. I feel that tension since we've been growing up. I feel that the world has gotten kind of smaller and more controlled, and it's kind of harder to do things that are just like you off on your own, getting away from everything. And I don't know, maybe that's part of just getting older and being mature and having like ties, but also technology's kind of driven us that way.
Yes. No, I mean, I think you're picking up on, well, first, let me go back to, as a storyteller, you have the forces of order, the forces of chaos, and then the goal is to be, the complexity in the middle. So if you kind of can envision that, like, you could see certain characters are too ordered, they're too precise. They need to have everything perfect. And then you have characters that are just too chaotic, right? And then the goal is to be somewhere in the middle, like you're not totally bound by all these strictures, but you're not totally anarchic, right? So it's kind of going back to the Goldilocks tale that you love so well. You're looking for that porridge that's just the right. Yes. So anyway,
bring it back. You bring it back to The Thief.
Yes,
the movie about the thief who isn't punished.
So
but Bill Turner,
yeah,
right?
I mean, I think
Bill Turner. That's that character. He's the guy, right?
So yeah, you would say probably he's like integrating the complexity and the chaos, or the the order and the chaos together into complexity. So yes, and there is something very appealing about this series. It's fun. It's good fun. Some of the later ones obviously like get a little ridiculous, but
yeah,
but they're fun.
I think mostly downhill from let's say two. I think one and two are both
Mm.
really solid, and then yeah.
Yeah, they do. They definitely kind of jump the shark, which is a very old reference to Happy
Happy
Days
Days.
and Fonzie actually jumping the shark while he's water skiing. But anyways, so yeah, I think
Motorcycling, most definitely motorcycling.
no, I thought he was. Oh,
He's like jumping
I
over
thought he
that
was.
shark tank on his motorcycle with the ram.
Oh, for some reason I thought he was water skiing and then he jumped over a
Um,
shark.
we
But
could certainly
maybe
fact
you're
check,
right.
of course. We can fact check,
Okay,
but I
we can.
believe
We can. All right.
strongly
All right.
that he's in his living
Okay.
color on a motorcycle, jumping over a tank with a
Okay.
shark.
That's possible. That's definitely possible. Man, can you imagine like just coining an expression from your season finale?
To jump the shark. It's
Anyways,
amazing. But so,
yes,
but
yes,
isn't this another example of what we're exactly talking about? Like once upon a time, you and I would never have
mm,
been able to reconcile that point. We are like, no,
mm,
he's water skiing and he jumped the shark, and
right.
I'm like, nope, motorcycle. And we could have disagreed our whole lives. Like we could have gotten fist fights
We
Friday at
could
the
have.
bar. We could have never
We could
agreed.
have.
We could have had a team of people on each of our sides who took our back on that opinion. But instead, after the
Yes,
show, we'll just Google it and then we'll know. And we're like, I mean, it's great, but isn't it a little like
yes.
kind of sucks the fun out of the world?
Yes, and so I think that that aligns with what you were talking about earlier. And so yes, the advent of pocket-sized technology more advanced than those on the moon landing missions, that makes things, maybe we could say it disenchants the world a little bit. We don't have the mystery, the magic. So yeah, you could probably get it if you went out, you went into like a nature reserve and you deliberately, went low tech. You could kind of get out there away from civilization. But yes, you're right. Most of the world has been, is being absorbed by the Borg, and we just have to make our peace with some of that. But although I kind of, I think I really think the population is going to just go off a cliff. Like, so everybody is worried about, 8 billion people. I just think like people, as these economies start, advancing, they're just not having kids. So I think
You mean a
eventually,
demographic winner? You mean like demographic winner? Straight
yes,
up, we're going so go off a
yes.
cliff. I
So
wasn't sure figuratively, but you mean literally
well,
fewer people.
no, I mean, demographically, I think we're going to stabilize. And again, I'm not, an expert in this field, but I think looking at, most of the developed countries of the world are in demographic decline. We would be if we didn't have immigration. So, um, what I guess what I'm saying is I think, not our kids, not our kids' kids, but like several generations down the line, it's going to stabilize. And then, maybe a couple billion people, and then they'll be cool, like things to explore again.
Well, you mean after the crash when like all the technology vanishes
Well,
and they're like driving around
no,
in
no, 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 no,
old
no,
converted
no, no, no,
Volkswagen
no.
Bugs with knives all over them and stuff? I mean, is that what we're talking about?
Well,
Or
so all right, so that is a whole nother. Fury Road is probably one of my favorite movies.
so good,
But
such a good just
yes,
atmosphere. Whoever made that, I mean, again, not much of a story to speak of, but wow, did they capture a
yeah.
feel and create a world with no real explanation that is just so engrossing.
Well, and I think that's the greatest part about it is because like the first time you watch it cold, and you're like, War Boys, like
What the
what is
hell is
this?
going
What's
on?
this? Why are they spray painting their faces? Like what's going on? And then as you like dig into the mythology, you're like, wow, this is really interesting.
And they never
Um,
explain it, right? You just soak it up because you kind of live it in the
well,
movie, right? I mean,
I
so there's
so I
no
yeah, I like when they throw in like little expressions, like one of the breeders, one of the prize breeders. She's like, I think it's your manifest destiny to go, to do this. And I just like when they throw, they kind of show how language changes and flows over time.
100%. And it's, yeah, those weird, like, don't understand it anymore, but sort of using it in a kind of parrotish sense, but it's taken on this new meaning. And yeah, again, amazing job of making like a super immersive world. I mean, as a storyteller, it's one of those like, wow,
Mhm.
good job with no exposition whatsoever. They always say you should show and not say, right? So,
Well,
and what a
so
great job they
yeah,
did.
and I get like my kids get like so mad at me because I'll like pause shows and I'm like, watch how they in this one elegant scene reveal plot, setting, and character all, when Max is like running, when they capture him and he's like running down the tunnel and he's trying to escape and he like falls in the water. they're building the world, they're showing his character, like his backstory, and then they're showing the setting, right? Like you see flashes of like, the agriculture on the top. And so I'm like, man, this is so it's just so like precise, elegant, I guess is the best way to describe it, because they do so much in so little time.
No, it's amazing. Although I'm totally taking your kid's sides. Like, don't pause the movie. Like,
Yes,
hey
I
man, we'll
know, I
talk
know,
about it
I know,
afterward.
I
We'll
know,
have a beer, but like,
I
you
know,
pause the movie, it just kills it all. Like,
I know. Yes.
oh, here we go.
I am, yeah,
Let's talk about the
I'm
movie.
a, yes. Yes. I am the buzzkill, definitely.
Oh, it's great. I mean, what are parents for if not to be buzzkills? But
Yeah.
but no, it's been fun. It's been fun watching a movie with the kids. It's been fun to kind of re-experience things for the first times through their eyes. Like I'm sure you appreciate that too. But when you see the movie you
Hmm.
see them see the movie for the first time, and wow.
Hmm.
I mean, my 3-year-old's like,
Yeah.
are they going to show the Kraken? Like, I think they are. And then my 7-year-old's like, are Krakens
Mm,
real? It's like, believe it or not, they are. He's like, I think you're making that up. I'm like, no, no, they're real. And so we go dig it up, and it just blows his little mind. And best part of
nice.
child, best part of parenting is like experiencing those things to your kid's eyes.
Yes. No, I definitely agree with that. It's like an extra, it's just a bonus.
Well, I feel like we're all like footloose and fancy free on the episode tonight because we just finished a six
Okay.
part series, which is the bulk of our shows to date,
Hmm.
on risk and management of risk and how do you kind of develop kids and how do you mitigate risk in the kind of effort that you're putting into building these kids. And we're done with it. We don't have to talk about it other than, talk about it in general terms in the future. So we can move on to something totally different. And
Mm.
I think you had something planned. So what do we talk about tonight, man?
I did. So, I've been wanting to do a book for a while. So, we're gonna talk about Tribe by Sebastian Junger, I believe. I don't really know how to pronounce his name. I think it's
Okay.
Younger. Yeah. But so he is a reporter. Uh Most of his work is as a war correspondent, so he kind of started in Sarajevo, and he went to, some conflict zones in Africa, and then Afghanistan he spent a lot of time. And then notably there's a documentary called Restrepo that was done on the firebase Fob Restrepo in the Korengal Valley, and so he spent time there, and so he kind of a lot of his work is informed by his time serving, along the front lines with combat troops. So we're gonna get into Tribe and see how it can reflect on the current dumpster fire that we are all living through in the 2020s.
Yes, it's our dumpster fire. It's not just a dumpster fire, it's our dumpster fire. We all
It
contribute a little in
is.
its creation and we all get to live in
Yes.
the glory of its
Yes,
reflected light. Um,
we do.
yeah, now let's get going, man. Let's talk about it. I like parts of it very much. There's parts I didn't like. I did love him talking about Sarajevo though. I was just in Sarajevo not that long ago for work for a decent amount of time, and holy hell, to read his reflections when he's talking about like war in the 90s and what it was like. And then I'm like, oh shit, well, 30 years later, here I am. And you could still see like, so what did they do? They've drawn around and preserved like the shell holes and bullet holes in a lot of the parts of downtown. So as you walk, you actually step over areas where there was deliberately shown that there was war damage still here. So I mean, obviously it's in better shape. The buildings are mostly fixed up, but they've kept some of it. It's almost like a museum quality. So as you walk down these like downtown streets of Sarajevo, one, you go straight from like Western civilization to Eastern civilization on this super firm line of demarcation where all of a sudden you are in like basically Arab culture, um, or more Turkish culture, I guess. But it's super sharp and it's super strange, but it all blends really well now. And it was just cool to see that same city and picture like all the artillery firing down on it, and just this terrible war zone when it was very, peaceful and kind of well adjusted, 6 months ago.
Yes, and I remember that conflict like probably when we were in middle school, high school. I remember it going on, but I didn't really know a lot about it. And then he does a great job of kind of describing the geography and kind of how it all went down, and a lot of the just a lot of like very poignant stories in there about kind of the snipers, and uh there's a vignette about like this guy in a suit that's like starting a fire, and just kind of like that is um emblematic of kind of what was going on there. So, uh, but the one that was interesting in Sarajevo was the girl that like her family got her out, and she actually like was miserable and actually like lobbied and fought to like get back into the city, because she was, um, because she missed, the sense of belonging and purpose that she had there. And that's a point that he hits repetitively through the book, is the how even in the worst of times, kind of the best stuff comes out.
So I like that point. That is one of my favorite points that he makes, but I think there's pieces of it that he kind of left out. So, and here's what I mean. So, one, that girl's story, that's every guy that ever went on R&R from a military deployment, right? Like when you go, the second you leave, you feel acutely that all these guys that you work with every single day are there in the war and you're not. So you're gone for, let's say, I don't know, 3 days to 3 weeks, depending on what your deployment was and where you ended up for R&R. But the whole time you can't help but think you miss it. You worry that something's happening that you're missing. You worry that when you get back, it's not going to be the same. And people are like, who's this guy? Where have you been on R&R? You with your vacation while everybody's here in this middle of this war. And so on the one hand, I could totally empathize with what she's saying, because there is a strong sense of purpose. But I think what he doesn't cover enough, and he does talk from that into PTSD. So he goes from in conflict to kind of post conflict difficulties, is that to me, that sensation does fade after a while. So there is purpose to be found in kind of this conflict. But as you step out of it, and particularly if your whole group steps out of it, I think there is kind of this sense of relief, and it doesn't have to just immediately lead to like mental stress and like, oh man, my life's falling apart. I miss that conflict. Some guys really can never put it down, but I think a lot of people handle it well when they come back as part of the group.
Yes, and so I think let me just step back and frame like what I think he's trying to do here. So basically, some of his overarching points are the modern society, despite like all of the embarrassment of riches that we have, all of this, we all live like kings, in this Western world. There's something that is missing, and it's making us feel isolated, disconnected, and mentally unwell. So, and he's pointing at, war is one of the sources that can kind of remedy that thing. You're absolutely right. It's not the only thing, but he's just kind of investigating why so many people have that experience in war. And what he settles on is obviously the title of the book, Tribe, and that idea of having like a belonging thing. So I want to let's see here. He talks about self-determination theory, which is basically like humans need three things to feel content. They need to be competent at what they do. They need to feel authentic in their lives, and they need to feel connected to others. So that's kind of like he's going to like kind of science for an explanation of like what these humans are finding in the conflict zone.
That makes sense. I mean, it's like, I think Maslow's hierarchy, when I read through it, that's what I was thinking. I was like, okay, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like you have the basic things that you need to kind of feel fulfilled. And he doesn't draw on Maslow specifically, but when I think about like, okay, well, conflict boils that down to the basics. And so if you're good at what you do and you're part of this close-knit group who's experiencing stress, I mean, anybody that's ever trained anybody knows the best way to bring people together is to push them through mutual hardship, right? So if you take a unit and make it suck together, it brings people together closely. Like I think there could sometimes be an isolating effect on guys who can't keep up. And you do see that. You see the kind of pack turn on itself and boot dudes out sometimes. But
Mm-hmm.
generally, I found it to be a great way to bring people together, being on kind of the receiving and giving into that. So I think he's spot on with a lot of that.
Yeah.
In particular, thinking through it in the lens of conflict. I would say, like you said, I think there's other ways we could get it, but he does show, I think, that that's an effective way to do it.
Yes. So, and let's just rewind back to where he's actually talked about kind of the Indian experience in America, right? So, he's talking about, and I know this is a part that you don't find like very compelling, so we can kind of like go into that here. But so he's talking about on page 14. He's talking about their life there. So, for all the temptations of native life, one of the most compelling might have been its fundamental egalitarianism. Personal property was usually limited to whatever could be transported by horse or on foot, so gross inequalities of wealth were difficult to accumulate. Successful hunters and warriors could support multiple wives, but unlike modern society, those advantages were generally not passed on through the generations. Social status came through hunting and war, which all men had access to, and women had far more autonomy and sexual freedom and bore fewer children than women in white society. Here I have no master, an anonymous colonial woman was quoted by the secretary of the French legation as saying about her life with the Indians. I'm the equal of all the women in the tribe. I do what I please without anyone saying anything about it. I work only for myself. I shall marry if I wish and be unmarried again when I wish. Is there a single woman as independent as I in your cities?
So, yes, I guess my number one concern with what he's doing is I feel that he cherry picks a little bit to take things that are good about, in this case, hunter-gatherer society, right? Native American society, subsistence
Yeah.
level. And he's not talking Aztecs, he's not talking Incas, he's talking hunter-gatherers. And so I think he cherry picks a little of the parts that would look really appealing from somebody who felt constrained by Western civilization to say, look at these great things you could have had then. But I question, just given my own limited experience with subsistence living, which I've done my weeks and weeks of it, just like everybody in our community, that is really all that pleasant. And and
Mhm.
and when I think of books like The Rational Optimist, Matt Ridley, love me some Matt Ridley. When I just look at the data that he's pulled to say, well, actually by pretty much every metric except maybe internal happiness, I don't know. I don't think he really goes into that. You would say
Yeah.
that people are better off than they were. And so I, I love a lot of what Younger says, but a lot of the stuff about, I think he really glamorizes hunter-gatherer life in a way that I
Yeah.
don't know that it's really
And
realistic.
yes, and that's part of like a larger issue I have with like glamorizing like the indigenous like in general like there's a lot of amazing stuff there, but like there's the shadow side as well, right? So like the page before he talks about virtually all the Indian tribes waged war against their neighbors and practiced deeply sickening forms of torture. So like, there's definitely like there's a lot of um darkness and there's a lot of drawbacks, right? So there's no like perfect panacea. So I think maybe what it is besides like the tribe, this guy Robin Dunbar, I don't actually know what his academic discipline is, but he basically has he studied animals, he studied human groups, and he studied like brain sizes. And he's found this thing he calls like the Dunbar number, which is based on the ratio of your cubic inches of your brain. So he's looking at like primates, he's looking at dolphins, he's looking at and what he's been able to do is like figure out the number of human relationships you can keep in your head at one time. And those are like people like that that you can like, hey, how's your daughter? Like you're kind of like having a relationship with. And what he comes down to is, well, he's got concentric circles, right? So he's got like 1.5 is the center, and that's like your soulmate. And it's 1.5 because like men can only generally have one, but women can have two. Like women can generally have a partner and a best friend, but men generally only have like one or the other. And then there's like a group of five, like that's the next circle, and that's like your real like ride or die friends. Call to carry to bury a dead body type friends, and then the next is like I think 15. Yes, if that was gonna happen, but anyway, so the max is 150. That's what the Dunbar number is, right? So his idea is that like when a human group gets bigger than that, you start to like you can't assess the character of the individuals. So what happens with that is then you get free riders and you get people that are abusing the system, and that's what we see like when we scale up into like towns and cities is like people can take advantage. So maybe it's like a small group thing.
Oh, and Younger does talk about that later too. I mean, that's one of the things I guess the charges he levels against Western civilization is that it allows
Mhm.
for free riders in a way that a small, more
Yeah,
egalitarian culture doesn't. And again, he's right. I mean, I'm not saying that that's incorrect,
yeah,
but I wonder sometimes about the small egalitarian society, and I think, okay, well, let's talk about just growing up in grade school. It's our own little small egalitarian society in its sense that we all grow up with. But I think about the kind of icons that we just wear through that period. And I think about how much I changed when I graduated school. I left home. I moved to another city, and then joined the army and moved to another freaking planet, it feels like sometimes. But in those times, you have these kind of clear opportunities to remake yourself. And so if there were things that you didn't like about yourself, or there was a dynamic that you were not happy to be a part of, socially or in your family or whatever, you could kind of rebuild that by just starting from scratch. And I wonder, when I think about what it would be like to live in a small tribe of people that you were born into and you died into, there's no ability. I think it's probably glamorization to say, well, everybody's the same and everybody treats everybody equally. Like, no, I bet there are people that got shit on, and I bet there are people that kind of had it made from day one to day end, and it would probably be really hard to shake that up, is my suspicion. Um, and so it all well and good if you're one of the guys on the good end of it, but if you're on the poor end of it, if you just kind of got a bad lot, like you're a terrible hunter or you know bad eyesight or whatever, I could see it pretty easily getting to be kind of a little bit of raw deal you couldn't get out of.
Yes, and I think the drawback would be an environment like that would be stultifying. Like it's you can't really, you know, you saw me like wet my pants when I was 4, and you're still like making fun of me, 3 decades later. Like that kind of stuff is probably, I get a
Exactly.
nickname, yeah,
Yeah,
like
that's
I get
probably
a
an interesting
nickname,
example.
yeah, yes. I mean, it's
Is
like,
that
it's
for example?
yes, yeah. I mean, it's never happened before, but yeah.
Oh.
So I think that's a valid critique. Um, so we have to like kind of that's the drawback of an environment like that, and we have to kind of look at that with clear eyes and see that it can be and that's going back to the Pirates of the Caribbean. Like that's like that could be like too much order, right? Like there could be too much. Um, you know, everybody knows too much about each other at that point. So
Maybe,
we have to
maybe.
weigh those factors. Yeah.
And again, I think that the way that he over glamorizes his tribal life to me just detracts a little from the quality of the book. Like I read a lot of history. I
Hmm.
really like, okay, well, show me some data on this. Show me a little bit of a citation. Give me some kind of reference. And I think maybe, I mean, he's a journalist, but I think he's quick to jump to conclusions or overgeneralize on things and say, like, well, here's 3 points of data. So therefore, I mean, it's great. Settlers who always wanted to go live with the Indians, but Indians never wanted to live like the settlers. I would. I mean, I'm
Right.
surprised there were any settlers left and they all just leave to move with the Indians. And so he, the way he casts it makes it a little too magical and kind of glamorous for me. And it kind of just
Right.
detracts from the image. But that's my only real complaint about that section.
Yeah, it's a very much like a Rousseau, like noble savage, kind of narrative.
It's a little too pretty, man. It's just a little too pretty. I'm
Yeah.
like, come on. I'm just a little skeptical. But again, that's only one point. But what you want to move on to the next section?
Yeah. So, yeah, I wanted to talk about, he's talking about, after the Sarajevo piece, he's talking about on page 43, he's like, the one thing that might be said for societal collapse is that for a while, at least, everyone is equal. And he goes through like an earthquake. He goes through, just various things talking about social breakdown. And then from there, he goes to like, during the Blitz in England, when everybody thought like they were going to collapse under the pressure of the bombing campaign, but from the Germans. But what they found was the opposite, right? Like suicides dropped, like all this stuff dropped. And the conduct was great in the shelters. Everybody's very respectful. And which reminded me of this other book, Paradise Built in Hell, which is basically like about natural disasters and the fact that like humans like pull together. Like, we're politically divided now, right? Like everyone's like, oh, like I don't want my kids to date somebody of the opposite political party, but like, if you're in like a 50 car pileup on the interstate, nobody's gonna like stop and be like, oh, dude, you had a Trump flag like on your truck. Like everybody's gonna be like, bro, like let's get everybody, let's take care of everybody. So I think
Hope
that's
so.
something about, yes, collapse and these crisis wartime situations that it has like a leveling effect, and it brings something more almost more primal out in humans.
No, I agree. And reading through that section made me think back to Camus' The Plague, which is a similar thing, right? You have these characters that are split out in the beginning of like, there's rich people, there's poor people, there's kind of criminally people, and there's normal people, and then you have this plague hit, and it all kind of normalizes everyone. Like, all right, man, we're just here. Rich people die, poor people die. We're all kind of pulling together. We're doing our thing. Some of the people who are kind of kind of shitheads before turned out to really shine and like turned out to show their true colors. But one of the things I love about that book is that he then brings it back out at the end. It's like, okay, well, the plague ended, and you see people kind of do what Younger talks about, which is they quickly go back to the way they were before and kind of forget about that whole experience. Well, maybe not forget about, but kind of just forget about what they gained, forget about that kind of magic togetherness came, and just kind of ditch it in favor of kind of put things back the way they were. And I think it's super insightful. Like, and again, it's been in a couple of books. But I I don't know about you, but I when I read that stuff and when I think about the kind of periods of hardship that he talks about, and like, yeah, on the one hand, I do know a lot of guys who kind of yearn for that togetherness and the feelings that came with it. But at the same time, I often find myself second guessing it, at least from my own point of view, because I'm like, well, would I really want to go back and do it again though? I mean, there's a lot of bad wrapped up in that. There's a lot of like moment to moment, like terror, death, like sadness. I mean, there's a lot. And so just that. And so it's like, well, on the one hand, it's we do tend to glamorize. Well, not glamorize. I don't think I glamorize like the worst combat stuff that I ever saw. I think I can look back on it with a smile and think fondly of some of the things we did. But at the same time, like I would be pretty hesitant to want to run through it again, just because I mean the dice could shake out so differently. And I don't know, man. I don't know. What do you
Yeah.
think?
No, I mean, I definitely like I retired when I retired because I was like, I'm done. And I got to a point and I was done. I'm looking at your book on my bookshelf. It was what it was, and I'm like, that's it's such a great like distillation of like the sentiment.
It
It
is.
was what it was, and
It's such a military thing to just be like, well, it was what it was, right? I mean, what's there to say? It just was what it was. It requires no further explanation. Some people get pretty salty about that term because they
right.
feel it's like a
Yes,
skipping over thinking kind of thing. But I actually think it's
right.
deeper than people give it credit for.
It absolutely is deeper than people give it credit for because it's like I had this like I got to do a jump at D-Day at Normandy. What year was that? 2018. And like and there was dudes on the drop zone like World War II vets. And I'm like talking to this guy and I'm like, give me the wisdom, man. Like tell me, I'm like, what do you got for me? And he's like, you're gonna do it your own way anyway. And I was like, yeah, I'm like, it's like the wisdom of like not giving advice.
It's the wisdom of
But
being past that. It's the wisdom of like, I was a
yes,
parent, I was a senior leader. I've seen this movie so many times. Why am I even going to
yes,
bother telling you? Because you're going to pull it off and see what you want anyway. It's like going past
yes,
Obi-Wan Kenobi to the next level. Like, yeah,
yes. And that's how I think about it. Was what it was. It's just like it's not. You're not like putting a value judgment. It's almost like you're just you're surrendering to the like unfolding of like all the stuff that's going to happen, and you're just like you're not like. I mean, you're not saying you have no agency, but you're just saying like it's almost like the Arabic like inshallah. It's just like
it
you know
has a lot in common with Inshallah. It has a lot in common with Inshallah.
it's-
Although in this case, it's at least a past tense one. Inshallah used to really, Inshallah. Okay, so Inshallah is the idea that, God wills it, basically. And it can be used to mean, at least in my experience,
Mhm.
I'm not an Arabic expert. I did live in that area talking to people for a long time. It can mean a lot of different things. It can mean that kind of stoic, I accept what is to come. Hey, and inshallah, it is God's will that this happen, and therefore that it can also be more of like, well, I don't need to make a choice because,
Mhm.
well, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. Like, inshallah, we'll see what happens. And they could also tend to, in my experience, almost being like, fuck it, like, inshallah, like, what can you do? Almost this like straight up just gesture of we could do nothing.
Yeah.
So just straight fatalism.
Yes.
And honestly, I kind of started to pick up on the nuance of that, but it was there's a lot
Yes.
more to it than
No.
you would
Yeah.
first think.
You're absolutely right. There are depending on the situation, it can be more fatalistic or less. Or it could be yeah. You're right. There's nuances to it.
It used to really piss
All
me
right.
off. I'm not gonna lie. It used to piss me off a
Yes.
lot because it seemed almost like a substitute for taking action. Like, I mean, I think
Yes.
as military people, and maybe just personality wise, we tend to assess and select people who are biased toward action, do things,
Yes.
right? I was just watching a Jocko Willink thing the other day where he was like, just do it. 70% of the time doing the thing is better. Like, yeah, I mean, He's right. We're certainly within our context. I don't know that I agree that it's always right, but either way, in our context, we are biased toward it. And so when you go over there and you're like, "Hey, can you help me fix the electricity?" Guys like, "Oh, inshallah." Like, no, not inshallah. We could fix that
Right.
ourselves. And I,
Yes.
I grew to understand more of why they said it and what they meant as I was there longer, and I think kind of accepted some of the futility of the
Well,
situation. They
yes,
already
because
did.
I think the Western mind is very much like linear, goal oriented, get it done. And then the kind of the Eastern mind is much more subtle and I don't know, like more focused on the context, I think. And inshallah is a very like epistemologically humble posture towards the world. Like you're just like, yeah, like you
Yep.
so yes, it can be taken too far. It can be very fatalistic and you're very passive and you're not taking ownership of your life. Yes, absolutely. But it's also a recognition of it, it doesn't matter how great you think you are, like there is, there's luck and there's like situational factors that are way out of your control. Like you do not control that stuff. And depending on what you believe, divine providence, all that stuff. So it's a recognition of like uh a human's like posture in the overall system.
It is. It is a recognition of one perspective on that posture in the overall system. But I mean, like, honestly, you could take that same idea and Ryan Holiday could write a book on it called Inshallah, and it could be a book about Stoicism. And there's a lot of overlap between
Yeah.
those two. They're not quite the same, but that accept that which I cannot change mentality, or nugget of wisdom or guiding principle, whatever you'd want to refer to it as, is definitely very much there in both. Like understand the limits of what you can do, and then don't get worked
Mhm.
up over the things that you can't. It's just it. There is a lot of wisdom there. Again, it used to irritate the shit out of me, to be honest. But
Well, yes, because it
when you're
does seem like
25,
it's an excuse for laziness. Yeah, I absolutely do.
it can come across
But
that way for sure. Yep.
there's a part about courage that I wanted to dig into, because he's talking about the difference between like men, like masculine courage and like feminine courage. It was kind of like very fascinating. But um, so humans are strongly wired to help one another and enjoy such enormous social benefits from doing so that people regularly risk their lives for complete strangers. That risk taking tends to express itself in very different ways in men and women. Men perform the vast majority of bystander rescues, uh, and children, the elderly, and women are the most common recipients of them. Men have to wait on average until age 75 before they can expect the same kind of assistance in a life-threatening situation that women get their whole lives. So,
Yeah.
so
You can see
basically, he's
why
just
though.
talking about like, so it's like physical courage, right? I think this goes back to like, we our talk about men and like, we're like expendable, it's just like, hey man, like get out there. Like if you succeed, cool. If you fail, like, sorry, like good try. Sorry you died. Um,
It seems to be the
but,
wiring, right? It does seem to be wired in there.
yes, it's in, he says like impulsive sensation seeking, but then he gets to women and he says, women are more likely than men to display something called moral courage. And talks about like, especially during, World War II, the greater empathetic concern women demonstrate for others may lead them to take positions on moral or social issues that men are less likely to concern themselves with. While women tend to act heroically within their own moral universe, regardless of whether anyone else knows it, donating more kidneys to non-relatives than men, for example. So it's kind of like physical courage versus moral courage right there being that. But then he like, oh, so that this is the best one. This is the great vignette here at page 58. In late 2015, a bus in eastern Kenya was stopped by gunmen from an extremist group named Al-Shabaab that made a practice of massacring Christians as part of a terrorism campaign against the Western aligned Kenyan government. The gunmen demanded that Muslim and Christian passengers separate themselves into two groups so the Christians could be killed. But the Muslims, most of whom were women, refused to do it. They told the gunmen that they would all die together if necessary, but that the Christians would not be singled out for execution. The Al-Shabaab members eventually let everyone go. So I thought that was like a badass example.
That is a great story. That is a great story. Honestly, if there's like a large swath of the world I don't want to go to anymore, it's sub-Saharan Africa. Just like while we're on the topic of places I never want to go again, like totally down with not going there. I think pretty much everything in my genes is like, yeah, you'll eventually die if you just stay there. I think the British Empire taught us that, so probably shouldn't go there anymore. Man, should just leave that place alone and let it work itself out. I feel like the more we
Yeah.
meddle, the worse it gets. But this is bordering on politics, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean it's hard to figure out what the right thing to do is, right? Because when you intervene, you you put in like scaffolding that's like not healthy to be there, right? And then you're creating like dependencies. So what's the right amount of intervention? Like that's the question.
That
When
is
do
a
you,
really dumb
you
question.
know, is it like, Rwanda, when do you intervene? Like, or do you just always stay out? And depending upon your political persuasion or your theory of international affairs, it's like just don't, let them kill each other and then they'll eventually have a unified country, or we intervene, or we're promoting democracy. So it just kind of depends on your worldview there.
Oh, it's tough. I don't want to pretend like there's any easy solutions to that. In fact, all 22 years of trying to solve those problems taught me is that I don't know that I can solve those problems at
Mm.
all. Like, I don't think there's a lot of hope for me as an American being able to impose or even facilitate any kind of
Mhm.
solution in most of those scenarios. I think for the most part, we do the combination of building the
Yeah.
scaffolding you're talking about that creates both dependencies and weaknesses that
Mhm.
don't really work out. And then also straight up just imposing things that really don't work and create a lot of resentment. So I'm pretty
Mhm.
skeptical of our ability to achieve those outcomes or anything positive.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
that could just be me being cynical, right? I mean, that
Well, that
absolutely
could
could.
be. I mean, yeah, you and I have a particular perspective on that because we spent most of our adult lives in that engaged in that endeavor. So, I
Indeed.
think, but I think that's probably like a lesson learned and relearned over generations.
Yeah, and I
So,
consider ours can just become a voice in the overall sea of voices in democracy to say, here's
mhm,
what we think about what we should do, right? I mean, everybody's
mhm,
voice counts. You should listen to people that have different perspectives, and I certainly accept that my perspective is not the only one on this. But
mhm.
I think it is well founded at this point. Like, man, we tried a bunch. We tried a lot.
Yeah, have you ever read the poem Arithmetic on the Frontier?
Mm-mm.
It's I'm like drawing a blank right now. Anyway, British poet that was like in the Afghan British War in the
Kipling,
1800s. But
Kipling, kind of the
yes,
stereotypical
yes,
one.
thank you,
Mhm.
yes, thank you. Yeah, yeah, Gunga Din and all that. The Man Who Would Be King, amazing movie. But anyways, but so this poem, like you read it and you're like, that could be about the U.S. experience in Afghanistan, but it's about the British experience, and it's like it's exactly the same. Like it, down to like how much it costs to train and transport the British soldiers, and then how cheap a bullet round is. It's just, it's
More
yeah.
than anybody else, Kipling's, I think war stories and poems, there's like a collection that I carried on a bunch of deployments.
Mm,
Yeah, I'm not really a big poetry guy, but his stuff, his writing just really 100% captures, um, a good bit of the sentiment that we experienced during the GWAT. And I I have never found anyone when you read some of his stuff, like there's this one about the guy that comes home. It's actually going to be in the preface for my next book. But there's this one about, the private who he grows up and he's like the lawn care guy for his lord's estate back in England, and then he goes to the Boer War and he sees all these things and he does all this stuff. And then he comes home at the end and he's like cutting the grass again, and he's just really trying to come to terms with it. And actually this kind of ties us back to Younger, right? That's he's trying to come to terms with all of this stuff that I did, all of these huge spaces and wonderful things that I saw, and the good, the bad, the
mhm.
terrible. And here I'm cutting the grass, and I'm like, how do you go back to that? And Kipling really nails that
Yeah,
feeling, really nails it better
yeah.
than anybody else
I
that I know of.
I like. I thought you were gonna say Tommy because like I love that. Like
That's another excellent one too, right?
it's it's like he's just talking about being disrespected, and then like when it's time to go to war, they're like, oh, like sir, like we need you. And it's just it's
Yes,
great.
that's exactly. It's another classic one, right? And he writes it all in Cockney,
Yeah.
so sometimes they can be a little hard to pick through.
Yes.
But yeah, it's 100%. It's like, hey Tommy, what are you doing here? Why are you in this movie? This isn't for you. And then all of a sudden, the guns start firing. You're
Yeah.
like, hey buddy,
When the band begins to play. Yeah.
it's so
Ugh.
it's so solid.
Yeah.
And again,
Yes.
the next book's all on privates, and so Kipling
Oh,
gets
nice.
privates. He gets privates super well. He gets them super well. I
Absolutely.
like it. And his boy was intense. think his boy was an officer, got killed in World War I. Changed the tone of everything. His later poetry is just not the
Oh,
same.
oh, I did not know that. Well,
Yeah, bad
damn.
bad times, right? Like changed the whole. He didn't write glamorous poetry anymore after that, which you might imagine World War I made a lot of people
That's
cynical.
yeah. So that's one thing. Like I've, you know, like you and I, it's like one thing to kind of accept risk for yourself, but like when you think about your children, I feel like I feel like this is a Game of Thrones quote, but I can't remember. I tried to like find like where it was. It's like people will do things for their kids that they would never do for themselves. Like they will commit crimes that they would never do for themselves, but they would do it for their kids. But I think about like, losing a kid in combat is like, I'm not like prepared for that. I'm prepared for myself, but I'm not prepared for like a kid. Like that would just, I can't imagine what that's like.
No, I can't either. I think that is a Game of Thrones quote. I think that's one of the stories. I think like maybe the what the hell's the bad family? The Lannisters. I think that's one of the
Mm,
Lannisters like strong arming somebody and be like, yeah, hold on to their kids, and then
yes.
they'll do something that they wouldn't do if you just applied pressure on
Yes.
them. I think it's like a hostage situation or something where they're like, bring the
That makes
kids and
sense.
hold them. But I could be wrong. It's been a minute since I read it.
Yeah.
But no. So that's a part of parenting we haven't gotten to yet. But and you read Once an Eagle? Do they make the squids read that?
Yeah.
Is that a
Yes.
thing?
I actually have a little once an eagle in the Infernal Tower. I like I bring out a little, a little references to it. Yeah.
Some people hate that book. A lot of army officers I know hate that book because they feel like maybe there's foisted upon them or something. I actually like the story. I mean, but the thing I'm thinking of specifically in this case is, the main character Sam and his wife arguing about whether or not their boy should enlist when World War II hits, and then basically her never forgiving him for forbidding that the kid do it. Like we have not hit this moment in our parenting journey,
Hmm.
um, and frankly, I hope we don't.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah.
So that's
That's,
but that's
yeah.
But that right there is more what I'm talking about. When we're talking about younger, and we're talking about,
Mm,
I don't want to say glamorizing conflict, but just talking about how much good there is in conflict. And I agree with him wholeheartedly that there's a lot of good that came out of it. Had a huge maturing effect on me and a lot of people I knew. Man, am I hesitant to hope for those circumstances to return or to
yeah.
have anybody else participate in them because it can really go sideways super fast.
So, yeah. So let me use that sentiment to pivot to this lady Tara Elizabeth Burton. So she's a theology PhD, but she has like, I can't find the other book I have of hers that's actually the one about religion, but she defines like what you get out of religion is meaning, purpose, community, and ritual. So you look at today in the West, we've kind of like we've gotten away from organized religion. Now, like, I'm not up on like the statistics. I mean, I think a lot of people still, you subscribe to a tradition, but I don't know how much it's actually practiced. And one of the things that Younger says is, the beauty and the tragedy of the modern world is that it eliminates many situations that require people to demonstrate a commitment to the collective good, to sacrifice for others. So I think that could probably be more in line with like what you're getting at is like, we can get this stuff without like war.
I I think. I mean, I think we can. I mean, obviously, we probably can. Maybe there is something unique about war. I do think there are positive virtues that come out of the war, except drone war. I'm actually like wildly opposed to it because I get no value. It's like all of the
Mm,
worst parts of war, but that's an aside. Um,
yeah.
but I do think there are things you could probably only get during war. But I guess I just worry like maybe we can get enough without having to go to that level. And certainly like to me that's more of a silver lining situation. Like okay, if the worst happens and you are in a terrible plane wreck, well then you're going to get a lot of value out of banding together with the other people to survive that. But it doesn't mean necessarily that would like to create plane wrecks for people to experience that magic, right? We can probably hope to capture it some other way.
Well, yeah, and so I think, and that's why today you see the rise of tough mudder races,
Yeah, for sure.
the like the go ruck stuff, training jujitsu. Like there's different things that you can push yourself into adversity that don't involve life or death necessarily.
No, I think you're right. And on the way you said earlier, I actually think I think that there is an unrecognized resurgence of no kidding devout practiced religion
Mm.
that is actually bubbling up. I don't know how they collect data on that. I don't know how they form studies on it, but in uh, anecdotally, I know we've talked about anecdotes a lot. I see a lot of it. I see, and I don't know if that's
Mm.
just where I am. I mean, I'm not in the Bay Area in San Francisco, for example, but I see a lot more of it than I ever did growing up.
Well, yes, and I think Younger would say like that's in response to the things that he's calling out here. Like that the West, um, we've made everything so frictionless, and humans are just not really like built for that. Like we want the ritual, we want to sacrifice, like we want to we want to sacrifice in service to something, I think. And so when we don't have something to do, we feel like morally, we feel adrift. And so I think that's where, the war is such a clarifying situation because you can't worry about anything else. You're just like directly focused on surviving the next like 10 seconds.
No, that makes perfect sense, and I think you're right. If there is a kind of resurgence in devout religion, I think you're right. That's what it's driving. It's the younger generation coming up and recognizing that they're a bit adrift and are looking for something to cling to. But we talked about that a lot, of course, on the spiritual
Yeah.
episode, and I think we don't got to totally rehash it. Um, one thing with war and conflict, and Younger does address this specifically that I loved and I thought was huge because it was just profound in my own life, was the kind of rite of passage aspect
Yeah.
that conflict can provide. And I'll generalize it, but basically he's saying that we don't have rites of initiation, in
Yeah.
particular for young men anymore. But remember, if he generalized that to all humans or just young men, but specifically with young men, there's no rites of initiation. There's no rite of passage. There's nothing that really says you're a man now. Go out and be a dude and take care of things and do the things that are expected of you by society. And so people kind of tend to drift along in this adolescence because they got nothing to kind of bring it to the fore, kind of force that transition. And man, one thing I will say about war is, at least for me, they're 100%. My first like real combat deployment absolutely achieved that, like 100%. My wife and I
Hmm.
talk about it all the time because it did for her too. Like on the home front, it was
Hmm.
100% this sobering, I am now a grown up moment to realize my friends down the street are sometimes getting killed. Other ones are getting blown up and losing limbs. And all of a sudden, all the stuff you cared about before seems pretty trivial. You come home and
Hmm.
all of a sudden, like, I did this thing. Everything before is me as a kid, and everything after is now me as an adult. But do you feel that you had that experience?
Yes, and I think that's why um we're running into a lot of problems today is because like we have this like very extended adolescence for kids, where and some of it's like economic, some of it's cultural, where it's like it makes sense for them to stay home while they're at college or whatever it is. Like there's not a we're like there's not that clear demarcation of like, okay, 18, like you're an adult now, like get out of the house, like go get a job, do whatever. We don't have that, and the kind of the rituals that we have, I don't think are sufficient. Like we celebrate high school graduations, but like I don't think there's there's not a demarcation, in the way that you're describing it, where it's like, like Joseph Campbell will say, these ceremonies happened, and it was like, okay, now you are a member of the tribe. Like that problem, all the problems you find, like they're your problems now. Like you need to solve them. You can't just like walk by and like wait for an adult to solve them. But so, and we don't really have that like definitive moment for kids today.
No, and it's important to remember that a ceremony is not a thing in and of itself. A ceremony is the culmination, in most cases, of
Yes.
something ideally arduous that you accomplished, and the ceremony is recognition of what you accomplished. And so I think
Hmm.
we mix that up sometimes. And you're like, here's a
Yeah.
trophy. You did a great job. Here is this thing that you did. You're like, I didn't put anything into that. High school, if it was so
Hmm.
easy that I didn't have to think twice about it, then handing me a diploma at the end of it basically just reinforces my idea that that was a giant waste of time. Like, well, yeah, it's a block check. Um, Having a ceremony that captures, like, I don't know, like when I graduated Ranger School, when they put the little tab on you, I'm like,
Hmm.
I earned that. This feels like an amazing day. You're like, wow, there's, we did a thing. And you look around and your buddies all did a thing and people are proud of you because you, no kidding, did something. And so the ceremony is recognition of something, the recognition that you did something difficult and overcame it and succeeded. And so
Mhm.
without that, the ceremony's pretty empty, right?
Yes. Well, yes, there's got to be, there's got to be for most initiation ceremonies, there's like a separation from the regular group. There's like kind of the event that is, um, you know, that the individual undergoes to affect the transformation, and then there's kind of the reintegration, congratulatory thing that you're kind of talking about. But like without the, without the like the soul in the game at the beginning, then it's very hollow. Yeah, absolutely.
Like I said, it's like handing you, if somebody hands you a green beret, like, congratulations, you can go buy one at the store yourself, but it's really the what goes into it that makes it special. And I think we've lost that to an extent as society. And I mean, I don't know about you, but one of the main reasons I even do this podcast is because I don't like that so many of the voices that are talking to men today either tell them they're horrible and they're part of a problem, or are telling them that extended adolescence is actually the ideal state. You should just be a bruh forever and you don't have any obligation to anybody. Just grow up doing whatever you want. I mean, to me, both of those are super destructive and they're both going to lead one, society to a place that doesn't make any sense, but two, individuals to a place that doesn't make any sense. You're going to end up at the end of this road and you're just gonna hate your life. I mean, I see a lot of guys that end up there. I'm sure you do too. Our community has its share of Peter Pans, and it doesn't go well. I don't feel like they've quite made that transition in, from caterpillar to butterfly.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. And I think it's a maturity state. So let me I want to kind of bookend this thing with what Younger talks about in the introduction and then what he talks about in the conclusion, because I think it has relevance to what you're pointing out right there. So one of the questions that he asks in the introduction are how do you become an adult in a society that doesn't ask for sacrifice? How do you become a man in a world that doesn't require courage? Then he talks about like in the 80s, he's like hitchhiking. He's trying to hitchhike to California, and he's in Wyoming, and this guy, kind of sees him hitchhiking and is a little concerned for him, and like, and Younger like thinks he's trying to rob him, but in the end, like the guy gives him like a sandwich, and he so he says basically like he'd been generous, yes, but lots of people are generous. What made him different was the fact that he'd taken responsibility for me. He'd spotted me from town and walked half a mile out to the highway to make sure I was okay. And so in the introduction, like he's saying like, why is this sentiment so rare? And then when he gets to in the end, in the postscript, he's talking about an Indian that gave all his food away, this Cree Indian in northern Canada, to like just strangers that were like out lost and hungry. And this anthropologist is like probing this guy, like, why did you do this? Why did you do this? And he says, suppose now not to give them flour, lard, he explained, just dead inside. And so there finally was my answer for why the homeless guy outside Gillette gave me his lunch 30 years ago, just dead inside. It was the one thing that, poor as he was, he absolutely refused to be. So I think when you're talking about that, it's like it's this idea that we all need to kind of take ownership of what's happening, and when we all like walk past stuff and we don't um try to address stuff out of fear for interfering with people, um that we all that detracts from all of us. So I
And
think
we'll
that's
die inside, right? We'll die inside a little
yeah.
bit. And I feel that a lot of what we see around us is the idea that we're all dying inside a little bit. But no, I love it. And you're right. That is a super profound insight. This idea that, like, well, even if I am broke because I gave everything away, at least I know that I did what I could to kind of make, I guess, the world a little better, take care of my tribe, however you want to characterize it. But that's kind of, I mean, it's one of the things we've touched on a lot over the course of the podcast is this idea that, like, well, what is that tribe now? I mean, I don't think it was all that long ago. And I don't want to, glamorize earlier America, but it does feel that there was a time when we were more unified than we are. And that if you walked down the street and saw somebody who was American, you would have been, hey man, we're Americans, right? We have 80% of the things in common, even if, and I know we can all go down rabbit holes about, well, it's only so many people, whatever. I'm just looking at generalities. It feels like we were more unified once upon a time than we are now. And it feels like we're so splintered now that you probably find more commonality with the average person you talk to on the internet who shares something in common with you than you do with any of the actual people around you. And I think that's kind of horrible, or at least you think you do, right? It feels like you have more in common with the other people you talk to on the internet. I don't actually think that's true. I think actually people communities mostly do have a lot in common, but that feeling, it 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 makes you feel kind of dead inside, right? Like, what am I even doing? Who are all these people?
Yeah, so I think it's it's a tough time now. It's a very polarized time, and people look at um, this country and they view some people view patriotism through the lens that um, this country is imperialist and it's done all these bad things, and it has, like, it absolutely has. Um, but I think there's two, there's like the two extremes, like going back to like the order and chaos again, right? Like, we've got on one extreme, we've got my country, love it or leave it. We can do no wrong. We're amazing. Like, we are the best. America, fuck yeah. Like Team America, right? And on the other side, we've got like, we are the worst. We're awful. We did this, that, and the other. We were founded by slavery. We perpetuate all these like horrors all around the world. And it's like, yes, like that's true too. But we can hold both those tensions in our mind, and we can say like, this is part of us, baby. Like, the darkness and the light. We can get that. We can get post tragic. Like, that's kind of the idea, is that we can say, yeah, yeah, we got a lot of warts. We absolutely do, but we got a lot of good stuff too. And let's focus on the good stuff, and let's make more of that stuff. And I think if we can get people to kind of come around to like, we've got blessings and we've got shortcomings, like, let's work on more of the blessings.
100%. And I come back again to it was what it was, right? But to kind of just
Mm-hmm.
stop looking toward the past as any kind of like reason to act any different way today, this moment, than we would otherwise act. Like,
Yeah.
one of the best parts of stoicism, but also one of the best parts of just normal army trench wisdom. Like, yeah, it was what it was, man. Like, hey, all that stuff happened. Bad things happen. Good things happen. None of that really matters now. What matters now is, well, what are we going to do to make the situation better right this second and move forward? And we can
Mm-hmm.
dwell on all the horribleness in the past. I mean, hell, if I did that, I mean, if we did that in interpersonal relationships, I think they would all go very sour. I mean, we all know people who tend to dwell, I think,
Mm-hmm.
too much on past hurts. And that doesn't necessarily make them pleasant or constructive companions. I mean, it doesn't mean you have to be an idiot and ignore anything bad that happened to you, but you do have to be able to kind
Mm-hmm.
of move past it. And I think that holds for society too. You got to be able to just like, well,
Yeah.
here we are. What are we going to do? Are we going to sit around chewing on each other for everything that ever happened in the past? No, doesn't make any sense. Let's just
Mm-hmm.
put it behind us and move forward.
Yeah, and I had like a Memorial Day post, and I talked about having skin in the game, having soul in the game, which is like, you're literally risking your life. And then the idea that like a nation is, like, it's an imagined thing, like we made this shit up, like America, like we made it up, like it's a thing that we
It's an
believe
idea.
in this thing.
Yep.
Yeah, like we believe in this thing together, like you and I were willing to freaking die for this thing. And that's because we care about it, and like, we want other people to care about it, and we can both like hold it accountable and recognize its flaws, but also like love and celebrate all the like great things it does, and we could do both those at the same time. So
Mhm.
my hope is that we can get people around to that, and so that they aren't just like reflexively like, oh, like America, we're corrupt, we're doing this, we're doing that. Like, some of that is true, like, I'm not going to deny it, but like, but there's a lot of good that we should not throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah, it's just not constructive to dwell on, right? It's just not. It's not constructive to dwell on those things. One of my favorite, if I had any advice to give someone who was feeling down on America, is like, man, go travel. Travel a lot. Go travel
Mm-hmm.
internationally. Go stay there for a little bit. Go live there and just go see it. And you'll see that everything's warts and all, man. The whole world is warts and all. Like, you go to,
Right.
we sometimes tend to glamorize Europe. You go to Europe, got a lot of problems, got a lot of internal problems, got a lot of historical baggage problems. It's got a lot of its own racism. It's got all the problems that you see everywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they just don't tend to beat themselves up as much internationally. So I think we just come
Hmm.
off feeling worse about ourselves. It's it's just not a constructive attitude. It's just not a constructive attitude to sit and focus on all the things you're doing wrong. It doesn't mean you don't acknowledge them, like you said, but
Hmm.
you got to just get past them and move forward.
Yes. So I think Tribe is definitely worth reading. It's a nice short read. Yes, we don't agree with everything in Tribe, but it's definitely worthwhile. And Younger, I think, I really enjoy his writing because I think he writes in a very clear, like simple way. I hate like when I'm have to like chop through prose with like a machete, but his like writing just, it's just very easy to read. And then Freedom as well. That's another good one. Maybe we'll get to it, maybe we won't, but where they're like, he's like hitchhiking, or no, he's not hitchhiking. He's just walking the railways between like DC and New York City. And it's just kind of a reflection on community and individualism. That's like really interesting. But
I got to check it out.
yeah.
But no, I enjoyed Trout. I mean, I know I beat it up a little bit there in the middle, but he had a lot of excellent points. It's well worth a read.
Hmm.
And you're right, it's not a long read or a difficult read. Pick it up,
Hmm.
give it a gander. It's got a lot to offer. Um,
Yeah.
man, I think we tangented a solid percentage of that show, but we did
We did,
keep
but
coming around. We
I
keep back and
mean,
forth, and
yes.
I went back and forth, and I
Yeah,
mean,
setting the table. We were setting the table.
I think Sebastian Junger would approve of our topics. You know what?
He
I
would.
have no idea, but I'm going to speculate and say that he'd be totally good with the way our conversation went because his book inspired us
Yeah.
to have a lot of interesting conversations today. So thanks to him for writing that.
Yes. Thank you, Sebastian.
Thank you. I'm sure our praise means the world. I hope you have a good weekend, man. We
Hey,
know what
you
we're going to
too,
talk about
brother.
next week yet. We got any ideas?
Uh, I mean, I got lots of possibilities
No,
we can do.
we'll talk about it offline, man. We'll figure it out. But
Okay.
hey,
All right. So
take care. Enjoy your weekend.
you too, brother. All right. You too.